The webinar is being hosted by the Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency in collaboration with its partners, the World Resource Institute, UNEP and ICLEI. This webinar is organised under the umbrella of SE4All's Building Energy Efficiency Accelerator as part of its webinar series. We're pleased that over 200 participants have joined and registered for this webinar. My name is Tim Farrell and I'm a Senior Advisor at the Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency. At the Copenhagen Centre we conduct research and advisory activities in the field of energy efficiency and serve as the Sustainable Energy for All Energy Efficiency Hub. I'd like to briefly introduce you to the speakers today. We've got Debbie Weyl, who's from the WRI Ross Centre for Sustainable Cities. We've got Curt Garrigan, is a Cities and Buildings Program Manager at UNEP. We've got Bruno, Gardner, who heads up the Carbon Trust's involvement in the low carbon workplace, and Pekka, Huovila, who coordinates the global 10YP Sustainable Buildings and Construction Program. And then finally, Angie Fyfe is the Executive Director at ICLEI in the US. So I'd like to thank all the presenters for their efforts and participation in today's webinar. Today's agenda, so I'm just covering off the welcome and introduction, and then you'll hear from Debbie, who will give us an overview of the Building Efficiency Accelerator. Then you'll hear from Curt from UNEP, who will give an overview on the principles for sustainable procurement in relation to energy efficiency in buildings. And then we're going to have a panel of experts. So we've got our 3 experts that are going to do a short presentation. And then I look forward to the question and answer session that follows. And we encourage all participants to post their questions at any time during the webinar using the question function on your GoToWebinar. And if you can please indicate which speaker you'd like to address your question to, that would be very helpful. And finally, I'd like to draw your attention that this webinar is part of a series of webinars on Building Energy Efficiency Accelerator, and all these webinars can be found on this following link at our knowledge management system that's been recently released by the Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency. So with that, I will pass to Debbie. Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks very much, Tim. So thank you everyone for joining the webinar, and as Tim said, I will give a brief introduction to the Building Efficiency Accelerator, which is the platform under which we are doing this work on procurement. So to start, the Building Efficiency Accelerator is an initiative under the UN Sustainable Energy for All platform, for which the main goal is to achieve sustainable energy for all by 2030. The idea of how to get to this goal of sustainable energy for all is through 3 main objectives. One, universal energy access, doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency, and also doubling the share of renewable energy. Focusing in on the energy efficiency portion, there is a platform of global energy efficiency accelerators, and this takes a sector-based approach to energy efficiency, and as you can see here, there are a number of energy efficiency accelerators, and we'll be focusing today on this one on buildings, so focused on promoting sustainable building policies and practices worldwide. Under the Building Efficiency Accelerator partnership, we work with subnational jurisdictions, primarily with cities and states, and right now we have 23 cities and states signed up to the accelerator. We, in the next few weeks, expect to reach 30. And they are cities and states from all over the world, from Eastern Europe to India, East Asia, Latin America, South Africa. So really good global coverage, and we're excited about the participation of cities from all over so that we can have both regional conversations among cities in the same region, as well as global conversations and a peer-to-peer network. In addition, and very importantly, we have a number of global organizations, about 36 global organizations that provide the technical expertise of the partnership. So the partner, we also have a lot of NGOs, associations, multilateral organizations, as well as private sector service providers and companies. So through experts in these organizations, many of which are represented on the call today, we are really excited to be able to provide best practices and expertise to cities. And I'll explain how in a moment. So why is building efficiency important? Why are we focused specifically on the building sector? But buildings can have a very large impact. They consume about 1/3 of energy demand and account for 1/4 of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And therefore, there is a very large potential for reducing the energy demand from buildings. In addition, there is a high potential for long-lasting implications, since buildings last for at least 40 years and often for 100 years or more. And therefore, with the decisions that we make now about buildings, we can lock in positive impacts rather than high-cost emissions for urban services. In order to accelerate building efficiency policy efforts, we believe in a partnership-based approach, which the Building Efficiency Accelerator represents. And I think one important thing to stress, although there are a number of barriers mentioned here, we find that the technical barriers do not tend to be the problem. We often know the solutions and how to solve some of the problems that we see as far as cities being able to implement building efficiency. Rather, we see a lot of institutional challenges. And so we're looking forward to working with all of these cities to help them overcome some of these institutional challenges. And one of those, procurement, is one that we will hear about today. So what are cities signing up to do when they join the accelerator? Within the overarching commitment of the Sustainable Energy for All platform of doubling the rate of energy efficiency by 2030, more specifically, cities are signing up to implement one enabling policy on building efficiency, to implement one demonstration project to show the community about the impacts of building efficiency, and very importantly, to create a baseline and track progress. And this is key both to improving building efficiency in the long term and being able to communicate both with other cities and potentially with financial organizations who may want to fund future building efficiency projects. So the Building Efficiency Accelerator provides, as I mentioned, over 36 global organizations have signed up to provide technical expertise to the cities and states that are part of the accelerator. In each city, there is a local action prioritization process where the accelerator encourages the cities to reach out to stakeholders to define what their policies and projects will be. And then the global network can help provide tools, trainings, and expertise directly to those cities to help them achieve their defined policy project and tracking mechanisms. So we'll be focusing today on one set of those tools and expertise that the network can provide. In addition, the accelerator looks to connect projects in cities with financial partners and to create pipelines of fundable action so that cities can more effectively finance the actions that they would like to take. And finally, and very importantly, the accelerator provides international recognition and collaboration with their peers, as I mentioned earlier, both through regional collaboration and global collaboration. So we expect that there will be more and more webinars and local events and events at conferences and everything. So please continue to keep an eye out for the accelerator. And today we'll focus back on the second item on the tools and expertise specifically related to building procurement. So with that, I will hand this over to Curt.
Thank you, Debbie. First, let me thank also all of the attendees for joining this webinar. We're at UNEP especially pleased to be working with WRI and with specifically with ICLEI on this particular thematic on procurement. What we want to focus on today is why procurement for building efficiency. What we are focused on is essentially using the process and really the power of government procurement as a driver for energy efficiency in cities. As the Building Efficiency Accelerator is focused on facilitating actions in cities, we're trying to demonstrate one means of doing that, and that is through the power of procurement. For cities, what that means is reduced and lower energy costs in their own municipal buildings, the ability to demonstrate leadership and stimulate markets, drive the overall market towards energy efficiency, and again, leveraging the purchasing power of government.
Excuse me, Curt, could you just, on the top left corner, there's the red arrow. Could you just click that one? Thank you. Continue.
Okay, thank you. The power of government purchasing is pretty significant. According to the World Bank, and you see the source here, the driving energy efficiency markets through municipal procurement, the purchasing power of city governments is significant. The top 600 cities account for 60% of global GDP, and in local markets and in national markets, 20% of national GDP is accountable to the public sector. So what happens in government procurement is significant, and a large percentage of that public spending is on buildings and building operations. The other thing that this does, that building efficiency does, is it encourages the life cycle costing and a different way of thinking about procuring buildings and their operations. So it's looking more at value over service life rather than simply buildings as an end product as a single purchase. The World Bank also within this report had identified, as many do, the barriers to energy efficiency, and specifically as it relates to procurement, they are not uncommon. It's a lack of information, what the benefits of energy efficiency and how to do energy efficiency and embed it within procurement. There are restrictive policies. Often subnationals and local governments are restricted from taking on debt, so that results in some limitations on what cities can do to procure building efficiency. There's a lack of incentives, limited resources for the upfront cost, the incremental cost for designing and building more energy efficient buildings, even if the operational savings are considerable over the long term. There's the aversion to risk, which results in behavioral inertia. In other words, not doing anything, just continuing the status quo, and a weak governance system. So those are common barriers. But also what's identified are there are significant opportunities for cities to take advantage of building efficiency through procurement. That could be purchasing energy efficient products. It could be in designing more energy efficient buildings. And on the retrofit side, it could be energy savings performance contracting that results in longer term savings and some upfront cost barriers being removed. The overall objective, partly of this webinar series and partly of this overall thematic, is to mainstream sustainable procurement policies. And then again, they would result in multiple benefits for cities, not only in improving the efficiency of a municipal building stock and the overall performance, but demonstrating best practices that can then be taken up by the broader market, both public and private sector. Again, leveraging on the procurement power of local governments would result in the greater accessibility and affordability of greener products. So that has an impact on goods and services. It can support labeling and certification schemes. In other words, if procurement of more energy efficient buildings is adopted as a target or objective of a city government. It could be tied to certification schemes. In the replacement of building equipment, it could be tied to labeling. So it supports, again, more broadly, labeling and certification schemes. The mechanism by which those are accessed and supported could be either through regulation, in other words, adoption of an ordinance. Oftentimes it is done through executive order, so the mayor or the chief executive of the municipality could determine that all public buildings being built or retrofitted need to meet a certain level of certification. Or it could be an administrative action. In other words, project managers at the capital project level in various city departments could simply incorporate building efficiency within their projects at the administrative level. And sometimes it is an incremental process whereby the administrative action can lead to the executive order and then could be incorporated into an ordinance and become statutory and mandatory. There are good examples of program implementation globally. One is in the city of Berlin, which used energy savings performance contracts for municipal buildings. It generated guaranteed savings, and that's one of the aspects of ESPCs, it's guaranteed savings. In this case, 3.4 million euro guaranteed annual savings from a 43 million euro investment. And again, one of the benefits is the greater accessibility and affordability of goods and services and supply in local markets as a result of that city investment. I mentioned mainstreaming, and one of the platforms that is looking at mainstreaming sustainable consumption and production patterns is what's known as the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production. This was adopted in 2012 at the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, or what's known as the Rio +20 conference. It's a framework to enhance cooperation and accelerate the shift towards SCP patterns. There were 5 programs that were identified as priority themes at Rio +20. They include consumer information, sustainable lifestyles and education, sustainable tourism, sustainable public procurement, and sustainable buildings and construction. There is since then a 6th program on sustainable food systems. What we're trying to deliver as part of contribution to the Building Efficiency Accelerator is leveraging the work of the 10YFP on sustainable public procurement and sustainable buildings and construction for the benefit of the cities participating in the accelerator. UNEP and ICLEI are the co-leads of the Sustainable Public Procurement Program, and UNEP and the government of Finland through the Ministry of the Environment are leads along with the World Green Building Council and the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology in the Sustainable Buildings and Construction Program. Those 2 relevant 10YFP programs are collaborating on this particular webinar and developing guidelines for sustainable procurement for green buildings. So this is the first really of 3 webinars that are planned as part of this thematic for the Building Efficiency webinar series or the Accelerator series. UNEP and ICLEI specifically are coordinating this thematic and coordinating generally with World Resources Institute as the lead of the Building Efficiency Accelerator. Subsequent webinars will focus on project design and construction delivery systems, building on this particular webinar, broader procurement strategies, and then the 3rd one will look more at legal aspects and procurement frameworks. You'll hear later from Pekka Huovila, who's leading the 10YFP Sustainable Buildings Construction Program, and he will touch on the principles for building efficiency, but also on project design and construction delivery systems, which will be focus of the 2nd webinar in more detail. So with that, I think I will turn over to Mr. Gardner with the Carbon Trust, as soon as I find my control panel. Bruno?
Thank you, Curt. Hi there. Thank you, Curt. And hello, everyone. Hopefully you can all see my screen. So I'm going to talk for the next 15 minutes about some specific examples from the UK of how public bodies have been overcoming the challenges to procurement in relation to energy efficiency retrofit in buildings. Before I do that, I will quickly introduce you to the Carbon Trust. We are independent experts with the mission to accelerate the move to a sustainable low-carbon economy. We're based in the UK, but we are very internationally focused and active all around the world. In a nutshell, we do three things. We advise everybody from businesses to governments and lots of public sector organisations on their opportunities in a sustainable low-carbon economy. We measure and certify the environmental footprint of organisations, products and services, and that footprinting covers carbon, water and waste. And we do a whole range of things around developing and deploying low-carbon technologies and solutions, ranging from providing finance for organisations to implement energy-efficient solutions, through to working with startups on the next generation of renewables. Across all of those themes, we're very active working with cities around the world, and buildings is of course a very big theme in much of what we do. So Curt talked briefly about some of the specific procurement challenges facing public sector bodies. This slide gives another cut really on many of those procurement challenges that we see a lot of with the cities and the public bodies we work with. It's a long, time-consuming process to procure anything in the public sector, especially when you're getting into complicated, large-scale buildings retrofits. And many organisations simply don't have the resource or the bandwidth to dedicate to that process. That issue is compounded by a lack of relevant technical expertise, both in terms of the technical expertise, but also in terms of the technical expertise around complex procurement exercises. Many organisations, certainly in the UK, suffer from having insufficient funds to invest in these sorts of projects, although increasingly funding is becoming available. And what you hear from funders is that actually the money is sitting there waiting to be deployed, but the projects aren't coming forward that are appropriate for that funding. Many public sector organisations feel that the business cases they are presented with to invest in energy efficiency and on the basis of savings are too uncertain. There can be conflicting interests. Often a finance department will be interested in procuring the lowest upfront cost solution, whereas other stakeholders will be interested in the best technical solution and perhaps will be focusing on lifetime cost savings, which may point to different choices than with a simple focus on upfront cost. And finally, there is a large and complicated supplier marketplace out there, and many organisations struggle to engage with that supplier marketplace and to know which suppliers to trust. So I'm going to talk about three specific examples from the UK, three varied examples of how public bodies are overcoming some of those procurement challenges. The first one is the REFIT programme, which is an end-to-end procurement framework. The second one is the energy technology list, and this is about creating minimum performance standards for products which can then be referenced in procurement exercises. And then the third is an accredited supplier scheme run by the Carbon Trust, which recognises best-in-class energy efficiency suppliers and helps to overcome some of those barriers around lack of confidence in the marketplace. So starting with REFIT, this is essentially an energy performance contracting program that was set up back in 2009, actually piloted in 2008 by the Greater London Authority. Since then it's been replicated across the UK, most recently being launched in Wales. And the idea is, fundamentally, this is a program to help the UK's public sector buildings become more energy efficient. In many ways this warrants a webinar all to itself, but I'm going to keep this high level. Essentially what this program is an energy performance contracting framework for public bodies. It makes energy performance contracting easy, relatively speaking at least. The basis of this framework is 16 pre-selected service suppliers, ESCOs essentially, who were selected through a very involved procurement process in its own right, and selected on the basis of their technical expertise, their track record, and their willingness to sign up to a programmatic approach. As part of that, they signed up to standard core contract terms to offer public bodies, especially around energy performance contracting, because one of the challenges public bodies face when moving into the realms of energy performance contracting is never quite knowing whether they're comparing apples with apples, because different suppliers will say different things. Participants in this program benefit from free expert technical assistance provided by a central program management office and technical experts. And these key features combine to deliver a series of benefits, including, relatively speaking, a speedy and simple process. Of course, it still takes time and it's not that straightforward relative to going out and buying a light bulb, but it takes away a lot of that complexity and speeds up the process relative to what organisations might otherwise experience. It provides access to experts who've been there and done that. It gives public bodies confidence in the whole process and certainty that the savings that the suppliers they're talking to are proposing have some robustness and validity, and so can be believed in. It's deliberately designed to be a flexible process, but broadly speaking, any project that goes through the REFIT framework will go through 4 overarching phases that you can see on this slide here, beginning with signing a memorandum of understanding with the REFIT program office, selecting buildings to go through the process, and agreeing a basic project brief. That project and then forms the basis to go out and run a mini competition between those 16 service providers who've been pre-selected. Initial site visits are undertaken, bids submitted, and a preferred supplier selected. And then at that point, the preferred supplier will put together a very detailed investment grade proposal and with detailed energy savings, energy performance contract terms, which will then be negotiated and signed up to, following which the measures will be installed. And then once the installation has been complete and commissioned, during the performance delivery phase, the participants in this program benefit from having a central resource to measure and verify the energy savings and to play an active role in ensuring that the energy performance contract is administered in the right way. So all through that process, participants, public bodies that participate in this framework benefit from a standard process, standard contract terms, the pre-selected supplier framework, and tailored expert support, which can be aimed at whatever the specific areas that are relevant to that particular organisation based on their internal expertise and the specific projects that they're taking through the process. It's deliberately designed, as I've mentioned, to be a very flexible process, and what that means is it can be used in a wide range of contexts. I'm not going to go down these lists, but you can get a sense from the left-hand box of the types of technology and the range of technologies that have been covered through this process. And on the right-hand side, these are buildings that have been upgraded to date through the framework, and you can see everything from universities to libraries to fire stations to leisure centres and theatres. So it's designed to be very broadly applicable, and the practice that we've observed is that it's been very broadly taken up. In terms of its impact, as I said, this began in London but has since been rolled out in different ways across the UK. To date, over 1,000 projects have been procured through the REFIT framework. Those projects have added up to over £165 million, not worth as much in whatever your currency is today as it was pre-Brexit vote, but still I think a pretty impressive overall investment. And though that investment is delivering at the moment over £10 million of audited energy savings per year. So if you add those energy savings up, those annual energy savings up to lifetime energy savings, you're starting to see some really impressive paybacks on these projects. And in terms of the CO2 reductions impact, 52,000 tonnes of CO2 saved per annum. And again, if you add that up to the lifetime impact, then you're getting up to some really impressive numbers. Just in terms of the Carbon Trust's role in REFIT, we don't run this scheme. It was created by the Greater London Authority. We've been involved in different ways from the start, and more recently we've got involved in the most recent REFIT programme to be launched, which is in Wales, which is a devolved administration in the UK. And for the Wales REFIT scheme, the Carbon Trust acts as one of the technical specialists that provides support to the participants that are taking, the public sector bodies that are taking projects through this process. And that support can range from anything from helping those organisations to prepare the initial project brief through to, at the end of the process, reviewing their measurement and verification plan and actually ensuring that the energy performance contracting is being delivered and adhered to in the right way, with everything in between. So it's a really very varied technical support role that we play. I'm now going to move on to the second of the three examples from the UK, which is the energy technology list. As I mentioned at the start of this presentation, this essentially defines minimum performance standards for a wide range of products in the UK. It is owned by really a combination of government bodies, HM, Treasury and Revenue and Customs, because it comes with tax benefits through the Enhanced Capital Allowance Scheme, and then the Department of Energy and Climate Change are the sort of the content owners from a sustainability perspective. And it's been administered by the Carbon Trust since it was launched. So through the scheme, products and that provide energy efficiency benefits to buildings are added to the energy technology list if they're able to demonstrate top quartile performance in their particular product category area. The list at the moment covers nearly 60 technologies with over 16,500 products actively on the list at the moment, and many more products have been on the list over the years that this list has been in operation. The reason I'm talking about it today is, and in this context, is because the list is used by many public bodies and indeed private sector bodies as a procurement tool, in that it is used in the procurement specifications to specify the performance standards that are expected and required through invitations to tender. So it removes ambiguity and gives procuring organisations certainty that what they're asking to be delivered is appropriate in terms of setting the right performance threshold. The next chart just gives a sense of how the energy technology list is designed to drive performance relative to things like building regulations. And what this chart shows is where, for a given product category, you might expect the distribution of products to appear in terms of product sustainability. So on the left-hand side of this chart is poor sustainability performance, and on the right-hand side is good, very good sustainability performance. And broadly speaking, you have a bell curve distribution across that range, with the vertical axis showing the number of products appearing at any point. So the really poorly performing products are excluded from the market by setting minimum performance standards, which over time are ratcheted up. Then there's a large portion of products which are so-so, and really their performance over time is being driven forward by building regulations which don't specify performance requirements, in the UK at least, for specific products, but they do specify requirements for overall buildings and the mechanical and electrical systems within them, and therefore those overall requirements drive indirectly individual products' performance. And then on the right-hand side of this bell curve, broadly speaking, is where the energy technology list comes into play. So by recognising top quartile performing products, it's encouraging organisations to purchase those most sustainable products. And over time, those the performance standards that are set for individual products are ratcheted up, so that the curve will move over time to the right-hand side. And at any point in time, just beyond the right-hand side of the curve, new products are always being designed and launched. The list is administered by the Carbon Trust, and there is a very large pool of scientists, engineers and technologists assessing many products each year. And those assessments are independent, they're very robust, critical analyses that take into account the latest product developments, so that at any point in time we and anybody who uses the energy technology list can be confident that it genuinely does demonstrate what constitutes best practice performance. So that can be very powerful in a procurement perspective, in a procurement context. This slide just gives a sense of all of those different technologies that are covered. I'm not going to go through it, but it's exhaustive. So now on to the third of the three examples that I wanted to talk about, and this is the Carbon Trust Accredited Supplier Scheme. It's a scheme that we set up a number of years ago to recognise best-in-class energy efficiency suppliers, and indeed some renewable energy suppliers as well. It's UK based, but actually this has formed the basis of lots of conversations we're having internationally at the moment with cities or countries that are looking to do something similar to bring certainty to the energy efficiency supplier market. It's a very straightforward scheme in the sense that suppliers that apply to the scheme are assessed across a range of criteria that you can see on the left-hand side of this screen. On the right-hand side of the screen you can see the technologies that are currently covered by the scheme, although that list is always growing. Suppliers are listed online on something called the Green Business Directory, which means it's really easy for organisations to search for relevant suppliers. Now, where this kind of dovetails with the other schemes that I've mentioned, in particular the REFIT scheme, is I think because the the accredited supplier scheme is much more relevant. It's much lighter touch really, and it's much more relevant to small retrofitting projects that public sector bodies might be looking to implement. The REFIT scheme is the sort of thing that helps to bring those large-scale retrofit projects through where energy performance contracts are relevant and the investment could be into the millions of pounds. The Green Business Directory is at the lower end of that spectrum, but these are the sorts of projects that actually add up over many projects and many organisations to really sizable numbers. And by having a directory of accredited suppliers that people can be confident are best in class, then that long tail of projects, if you like, are much more likely to be implemented, and when implemented to deliver the energy efficiency savings that they have the potential to deliver. So that's the end of my presentation. Very happy to take questions at the end, but now I will hand over to Pekka. Pekka, over to you.
Thank you, Bruno. In my short introduction to this sustainable building and construction procurement, I will first a bit clarify what we mean by procurement and what about sustainable buildings. Then look at the innovation opportunities in the whole supply chain. Then how to manage the performance and value of buildings, and give at the end some procurement examples that can be then followed by discussion. UNEP defines this sustainable procurement as a process to meet the needs as value for money on a whole life basis with a minimizing damage to the environment. So the key issue is here not to just buy the cheapest stuff, but find the value for money on a whole life basis, and at the same time minimizing damage to the environment. ISO standard defines the sustainable buildings, which is the process that delivers required performance and functionality with the minimum adverse environmental impacts while encouraging these economic, social and cultural aspects at local, regional and global levels. And here in bottom I show some examples of different building types that can be seen as sustainable. There are offices, different services, housing, and then educational and university buildings. They look quite different and they are in different environments, and by that I want to communicate that in our global 10YFP SBC program we look at the whole, let's say, three-dimension sustainability, not only resource efficiency but also the other aspects, and globally in all regions of the world. When looking at the buildings, the key aspects there are the long service life, which means that we have to look at the adaptability in use phase, also how the building is then operated and maintained, because the performance of the building can be quite different after 10 years than it was in the beginning if it's not properly maintained. And the other aspect is the location. When setting the targets for the procurement, one should look at where it is located. In some cases, some studies show that like office buildings can have a bigger negative environmental aspect just because of the location if they are not connected with the public transport, as an example. And to summarize this thing of these definitions, I show an example of this Japanese CASB rating scheme based on eco-efficiency. So what we try to procure is like value for money, which means that there's some beneficial output, some performance that is achieved, and that is compared against minimized environmental loading. So we are not optimizing only one component, but looking at which is the performance over lifetime with the minimized environmental loads. And that can be, even in that system, that's one certification scheme, can be put in the, can be quantified, and there you see the development in housing. The vernacular housing were already quite sustainable environmentally, but actually the performance was not as good, and the development led into higher performance of building with higher environmental loads. Another direction is to go more sustainable direction, and procurement is an important aspect in that. A quick introduction to these delivery systems, how the contracts are made. The second webinar will focus more on that. The terminology here is not based on any standards. It's what we used in a recent international research project that has been referenced in the bottom, and the darker geometrical objects define the role of the client. So in this prescriptive, like mainstream procurement system, the client is defining the end solution and typically chooses a lowest bid. And that is, I think, functioning very well, especially if the client is able to set all the explicit targets, preferably in the quantified terms, and can verify the conformity. The challenge may be that there's not much opportunities for the supply chain to provide better solutions if it's already fixed in the beginning, and then it also depends how the client is maintaining the solutions that they have specified themselves. And then the other, like alternative approaches, this supplier support, as I call it, which is often performance-based. That means that the client is not defining the prescriptive solutions, but rather the suppliers that are in charge of the design, they can take care of the maintenance over defined period of time, or they can also be involved in the financing the whole project. So the roles are changing there. And then the third model in this structure, what we call as collaborative models, can be alliance contracting, integrated project delivery, is more sharing these responsibilities, both positive and negative risks, and that is based on early involvement of key partners, which means that the development of the solution is happening together with the supply chain or key partners there. That can be linked with the lean construction principles and quite often the help of building information modeling, use of the IFCs, industry foundation classes, where you can do the simulations early in design that may give a better understanding to the client what will be achieved at the end in the operation. It also means that if the final performance is not achieved, you can trace back which are the reasons for that. And if we take energy consumption as an example, that is possible to monitor already early in design phase, make a simulation, and then look at the future indoor performance and energy consumption and adjust the building to meet those needs. These are the three basic models that I want to introduce, and there are many variations to these. There's not only one size that fits all, and all kind of public-private partnership systems that are used in road construction and other infrastructure projects, they also apply in buildings. Depends, of course, on the market in question, whether the building legislation acknowledges these models or if there are some constraints there. But basically, all of them can deliver good solutions as long as you have the whole process under control. And the main phases, the 5 phases that I show here, is that it's important to set the requirements, so to document the performance targets so that at any given point in the process one can validate what was actually tried to be achieved, not only the technical solutions, but what is the end performance. And in that way, if there are changes in the design process, if the end product performance is also changing, then one should change the targets as well. Then the second point is to define what is the financing strategy. Is it the client taking the responsibility of the maintenance, or which are the conditions there, and then choose the right contractual mode. And like I said, one of these systems is not better than the other. It depends the case and client's knowledge, and also the market, how the market can deliver what is set as targets. Then the third point, selecting the team. For that, I don't have, unfortunately, time to go through in detail today, but if the better team you have there, the less burden you have in managing the process. Unfortunately, often this building construction sector or tradition works in a bit like mistrust between the client and suppliers, and that means that all the agreements and amendments have to be documented accurately. But it's very important how well you can communicate with the team. Then the fourth point on managing the performance, there are different ways in doing that. One can have sensor-based online simulations. One can use certain certificates there to guide the design and construction process. Or then you can go let's say, through some core indicators, which means that it's intended to be a more simplified system than those certification schemes that require consultant and also some cost consequences, but with a smaller number of representative indicators one can already estimate the end result. And then I try to give some examples in addition to those that are already given here, and finally this monitoring, verification, reporting, and also continuous improvement, because for the professional clients it will be good to keep in the mind that the things can be always done better in the future projects. Then some examples of those certifications. There's one from housing in Morocco using the French HQE system. Another one that's for the that's the German DGNB system. That's also for housing, that's in China. So these are systems that are often used in different markets. They can serve as a checklist in the process to see which are the criteria, characteristics that function. There's another one from South Africa, housing as well in this case. And you see which are the characteristics that are performing to which level, and based on that you get a label to the building. And the international investors often like these labels, and they can do benchmarking. There are 30 or 40 other systems like LEEDs and BREEAMs. I just took some examples from those countries I mentioned. This is another example we are funding in our SBC program from the Clearinghouse Trust Fund. UN Habitat is leading one project where they try to validate, test rating scheme that's for housing as well. That's more for developing countries, and there often we are lacking the baseline, and it's not only the environmental issues that are there high in the agenda, there are also aspects related with the cultural, social aspects, and of course economic also. So these are some examples of the using certifications or core indicators there. Often these quantified numbers are then combined into some overall figure that provides some possibility for benchmarking, like if the say, professional client also build asset, they can have a cross-section and see what's the range between the buildings they own, or over time they can see the evolution, whether that leads into improved performance of the buildings. Then some aspects of these core indicators. I'm coming from Europe, and in our continent, the European Commission is now strongly supporting the approach of defining small number of core indicators that can define the life cycle performance and value of buildings. It's not like final, it's in a consultation phase, but it's public. I share the link with you there at the bottom of the slide. So that consists of 6 macro objectives and totally 12 indicators. So setting the target from the procurement point of view, we can look at the greenhouse gas emissions in operation, energy consumption and global warming potential. Then on the resource efficient material life cycles, full life cycle assessment, then service life issues, recyclability, waste, and then water as an aspect. To have a closer look at that, we don't need to go through that, but actually you should have a camera button there in the webinar system. You can click it down and study more in detail if you like. So these were the 7 core indicators for the environmental performance, and then these like value indicators, these 3 more macro objectives looking at the like healthy outcome of the building, indoor air quality, then looking at the resilience to climate change, meaning thermal comfort, also the cooling demand, and then looking at the life cycle optimization through life cycle costing, and also how to create value and how to manage risks. And that may split into bigger number of like sub-indicators, like this indoor air quality may contain aspects from CO2, box, etc. So this is a system, and there's a reference to how these things can be obtained and optimized today. So that was the examples of approaches or certifications, and then those core indicators, and then some examples. Like the first one is coming from Italy, that's for energy performance contracting for social housing, and that was use of on an ESCO, energy service company, through the competitive dialogue process. And in those contracts they were making there, they were like given a guarantee. That's a bit what Curt already explained, guarantee of those immediate savings, and then also how much that will be like improved per year. So that means that the client may not like increase the energy efficiency of the buildings in use over their lifetime, but it's a like supplier that is taking charge of that and also guaranteeing like fixed achievements there. Another one that's from Berlin, and that was already I think mentioned by Curt, a bit similar approach. The third one I have from my country, Finland, that was about this passive house, second housing thing, but that was like the Federation of the Construction Clients organized so-called procurement clinics where they invited different suppliers. So in a way together they were looking at these open interactive workshops and dialogue, which are the possibilities of meeting those social housing solutions at the passive house level. And then the last example is from Austria, Farrell, and that was also like working together. So the member communities there, they wanted to have efficient renovation for their buildings, and they together formed a pool of experts and then looking at what could be done together. To conclude my presentation, I tried to focus on the issues, how important it is to set the sustainability targets, document them down so that they can be traced back whenever, then looking at what is the financing strategy over time, which is the relevant contractual model to be used, then how the supply team could be selected, how to assess the conformity, and then how to monitor the performance, user satisfaction in order to achieve this continuous improvement. I close here, and I will hand it over to Angie from ICLEI, who will tell us more about this procurement.
Angie, could you just unmute yourself, please?
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you may be. Thank you very much for joining the webinar today. This is Angie Fyfe with ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. calling in from the U.S. office in the western United States. I hope you're all familiar with ICLEI. We are an association of 1,500 plus local governments who are addressing climate change at the local level. And specific to the Building Efficiency Accelerator that we're discussing here today, myself, along with my colleague Lucy Price in the ICLEI World Secretariat's office, are very much involved with WRI and our partners here, UNEP and others, in providing resources, outreach, and engagement for local governments wishing to participate in the Building Efficiency Accelerator. Debbie mentioned in her introductory remarks that local governments interested in participating in the accelerator would be asked to identify one policy that they would like to implement or review and explore as part of their building efficiency strategy. And wanted to make sure that you're aware that sustainable public procurement is one of those policies that you as a local government could pursue under the Building Efficiency Accelerator, and Curt, Garrigan at UNEP and I would be here to assist you along the way. So these are the 10 agendas of ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. This is how we engage with local governments, and you can see that the sustainable local economy and procurement is one of those areas. It's my pleasure today to speak about the many resources that ICLEI's Global Procurement Center has gathered over the years and point you to those resources. We've talked about why sustainable procurement is important for local governments, and the only other indicator here that I would touch on would be aligning with broader sustainability goals. Oftentimes we see a sustainability office or a mayor's office set forward ambitious goals only to have those goals fall short because the contracting and procurement and finance departments within a local government perhaps have not been engaged to the level that is necessary to achieve those goals. So we see sustainable procurement as an opportunity to bring those voices into the overall sustainability goals and to help meet those goals. This year marks the 20th anniversary of ICLEI's work on sustainable procurement. As you know, sustainable procurement brings environmental, societal, and economic benefits at the local level, and building on what Pekka had to say, I will also add cultural now to my list of benefits of sustainable procurement. Over the past 20 years, through its activities on sustainable and innovation procurement, ICLEI has been involved in 150 projects, organized 100 conferences, seminars, and webinars, and trained over 2,000 people, supported 300 cities in more than 50 countries on sustainable procurement. ICLEI's sustainable procurement work began in 1996 with a survey on the purchasing practices of European local authorities, and in 1998, the first EcoProcura conference, which is a series dedicated to sustainable procurement, took place in Hanover, Germany. Another important milestone of these first years was the study Environmental Relief Through Green Public Procurement in Europe, or RELIEF, which was carried out during a 2-year period, 2001 to 2003, and provided the first quantifiable figures on the potential of the environmental benefits of green public procurement in Europe. In 2006, ICLEI became a founding member of the Marrakesh Task Force on Sustainable Public Procurement. And continuing on in 2009 and over the next couple of decades, the ICLEI members have included sustainable criteria in their procurement policies and procedures, building on a number of research projects and programs that ICLEI and its many partners over the years have embarked on. Last year, we launched the Global Lead Cities Network for Sustainable Procurement, which includes cities from 5 continents who have joined forces and committed to report against quantifiable targets, providing a clear indicator of the impact of sustainable procurement in different countries, and we're happy to continue to work with those cities and to provide this unifying voice advocating for sustainable procurement in the international community going forward. And of course this year we are launching our work with the Building Efficiency Accelerator as an advisor on sustainable procurement. And so I want to turn quickly to some resources for all of you to explore. The SP platform, or the sustainableprocurement.org, I'm going to open up quickly and just show you how you can search for resources here. This is the sustainable-procurement.org website, which is maintained by the ICLEI Global Procurement Center, which is one of the important tabs, a resource center. At the resource center, you're able to search case studies, policies, and so forth. Sorry, we're having a little bit of a slow load here. We'll give it a moment. Here you can research many of the case studies. Our panelists here already on the webinar. We have various topics, as you energy efficient topics that you can search. You can also look for procurement criteria or policies, fact sheets, studies and reports, labels, and so on. And of course you can also search by language if you would like a specific topic to be discussed in a certain language. Here are some of the latest resources that are available. You can see some energy performance contracting again, and then certainly other topics outside of building and construction and renewable energy and that are available to you. There's also an innovation procurement platform. This is innovation-procurement.org. And when we discuss innovation for procurement, we're really talking about local governments stepping out and taking a lead in trying out a new product or a new service that may not be commercially available on a wide scale. This is something that the General Services Administration, for example, through the U.S. federal government does through their Green Proving Ground. They use new and innovative energy efficiency building technologies within federal government buildings, study them, write up the results of the use of that particular product or service within a federal environment, and then share those learnings with others. So this is a procurement of innovation platform that I would encourage you to also take a look at, which gives you some information about the legal frameworks, the policy frameworks, how to implement procurement of innovation as well. Curt also has a number of great resources available through UNEP's website. He mentioned the 10 YFP programs and the Sustainable Buildings and Construction. The Sustainable Production and Consumption Clearinghouse is also available with many different resources and case studies for your review. So please do contact us. We have materials available, as you've seen, in multiple languages. ICLEI has 17 offices worldwide. Those regional offices in your country are there to assist you. I also want to call your attention to Mark Hudson, who is the Global Director of ICLEI's Sustainable Procurement Center, and encourage you to reach out to Mark if you have any questions, and certainly I am available as well. So thank you for your time and attention today. I will turn it now back over to our moderator, Tim, for some questions. Oh, there we go, Tim. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. As you've heard, we've heard from 5 very good presentations, and just to summarise, and we've had a few questions come in, and we'll come to those shortly. So if you've got any other questions, please use the question function on your GoToWebinar panel, and we'll come to those shortly. But we heard from Debbie, who gave a brief introduction to Building Efficiency Accelerator and the SE4All initiative with its 3 objectives. She talked about sustainable building practices and work with the subnational governments. She talked about best practices and expertise for the cities that are available, and the huge wealth of experts and resources on hand to help cities improve their efficiency. We then heard from Curt, who talked about government procurement and how it serves as a driver of building energy efficiency to encourage a life cycle thinking. He talked about barriers for energy efficiency procurement, talked about opportunities, the purchasing of more energy efficient products, designing more efficient buildings, and energy performance contracting. Also talked about procurement results and multiple benefits for the cities, and introduced 10YFP framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production. And also he's developing the guidelines for sustainable procurement for green buildings. We then heard from Bruno, who talked about the common procurement challenges for the public procurement. He listed 3 specific examples from the UK to overcome procurement challenges, talking about refit, energy technology list, and carbon trust accredited supplier scheme. And then we heard from Pekka, who gave the definition of sustainable procurement, covering off the value for money on the whole lifetime basis while minimising the impact on the environment. He talked about the example of the Japanese scheme, project delivery systems, prescriptive, performance-based, collaborative models. Also covering off the steps of sustainable procurement and a number of examples of programs from Italy, Germany, Finland and Austria. And then we heard from Angie, who was our last speaker, covering off the importance of aligning sustainable procurement with broader sustainability goals, covering global city lead cities network and building efficiency accelerator advisor. And again highlighted the huge amount of resources that are available on sustainable procurement, the resource centre, case studies, policies, procurement of innovation platform. So again, I would like to thank all of our presenters. We've covered a huge amount of detail, and also would like to thank the participants that have been firing off their questions. And I think I'll start by, the first question was for Debbie. Debbie, what are the criteria for cities to join the platform?
Thanks very much, Tim. So the main criteria right now, I should mention, this is the Building Efficiency Accelerator, as was I think alluded to a few times, is kicking off implementation right now, this summer. And so this is sort of the first round that we're doing of what we hope to be an ongoing program, at least through 2030, which is the current date of the goal under Sustainable Energy for All. So right now we have primarily, the cities that are already a part of the accelerator have primarily been cities where global partners, so the organizations, associations, etc., where global partners have already been working. But if you are listening to this webinar and you are in or of a city or state that is interested, please feel free to reach out to me. Make sure that my email can be circulated. And we'd be happy to talk to you about the possibility of your city or state joining. Similarly, if you are part of an organization, association, regional or global, that is interested in joining the accelerator, please do let me know, or if you just want to know more, and I'm happy to have conversations and send materials to help you understand how you might be able to contribute and participate.
Thank you. The next question for Curt. Curt, there was the question about the procurement. So they mainly focus for government buildings, or is it much broader than that?
Well, thank you for the question. I focused the presentation today on cities and government actions, although the principles of sustainable procurement are as relevant to private sector organizations and anyone who's designing, building, operating a building as it is to the government. So I think the principles generally are applicable by private sector, and it's not related to any particular building type. All building types can benefit from greater efficiency, and how to embed those targets and objectives in procurement is relevant to all.
Thanks, Curt. And we've got a question for Bruno. The question was about sometimes few countries put barriers for international access. Have you got some ideas how to address some of these constraints?
That's a difficult question, I think. I mean, the barriers for international access could be many and varied, so hard to answer, I think, directly without knowing a little bit more about the specifics. You know, something like the REFIT framework starts with a procurement process being run in order to select the organisations that sit on that framework. If you look at the organisations, if you go to the REFIT website, you can see that those 16 organisations, and many of them are very internationally focused. So in that sense, there are no barriers to international organisations providing solutions in the UK in this case. And the framework is there as a blueprint, which I think is intended to be replicated as widely as possible around the world, but I think it would require equivalent frameworks to be developed in other countries in order for it to be of use. Of the other examples I gave, the Energy Technology List and Carbon Trust Accredited Supplier Scheme. Carbon Trust Accredited Supplier Scheme, anyone can access that. It's a free resource, and to the extent that the suppliers on the list are active internationally, then there are no barriers there at all. Likewise, the Energy Technology List, you know, this is a UK scheme with UK tax breaks linked to it, but the fundamental information that the technology list provides is very internationally relevant, and so anybody from anywhere can access that list, can see what those minimum performance standards are, and can see the specific products that appear on the list and use those in their procurements wherever they happen to be based.
Thank you. And Bruno, there was also a question about, in relation to the REFIT projects, what's the average payback period?
I had that written down somewhere and it's not to hand. It's something like 6 or 7 years, I think. So, which I think isn't bad if you consider that these are typically retrofitting schemes that will include a whole range of measures. So within that bundle of measures, you will have some projects that are paying back, or some elements that are paying back very quickly. Typically lighting is the example that's always used in the UK, where under 2-year paybacks, and you know, in the case of lighting solutions that are used for many hours every day, then it can be less than a year. But then you will also have within that bundle of measures specific measures with longer payback periods. And so one of the challenges, and where procurement of building retrofits becomes more art than science, is bundling together those measures so that you don't begin by cherry picking the most straightforward measures with the quickest payback periods, because by doing that, while they're themselves easiest to get over the line, you're then leaving a whole load of other measures there that do have payback periods that are economically viable but become less attractive to the finance teams of the procuring organisations. And so by bundling those measures together, the average payback period does go out a bit, but not to the extent that it becomes unattractive, and it's a great way of getting more measures over the line sooner.
Thank you. And we've got a question here for Pekka. Pekka, what is the strategy for implementation and dissemination of the UN Habitats tool, and what's the main target audience?
Thank you very much for the question. Just a quick introduction to how this project was initiated. We launched a trust fund call in the COP21 in December in Paris for a project that could be meeting our program objectives in coming 1 or 2 years. And out of the 108 applications we received from developing countries, emerging economies, that was one of them. And one of the core criteria we had was precisely the replicability and scalability of the outcome. This UN Habitat tool that's consisting of a team of universities, Curt from Grenoble and Cambridge from UK, as well as research organization VTT from Finland. And they have 3 governments that are committed for this pilot phase, and they are Burkina Faso, Kenya and Nepal. So it's tested in first phase in 3 regions that are slightly different, and the governments are like supporting, they are giving the test cases. The team that is validating the tool is the project actors, those guys that are like setting it up. The intention is to test whether the information can be retrieved, whether the indicators are like relevant, etc. And based on these 3 test cases, the intention is then to replicate them further, and the potential like end users then, in addition to those individual clients and project teams, are different governments having housing projects, also like UN Habitat's own projects. Then I see also the funding organizations that are financing those social sustainable housing projects globally could use that in order to assess the impacts of their programs, and also to establish the baseline that is a bit missing today.
Thanks, Pekka. And Pekka, there was another question that's just come in saying, which are the best benchmarks for near zero emission settlements in your opinion? So what are the best benchmarks?
Net zero examples, they are often individual cases here so far, and the cases that I've been involved in myself, it was quite easy to reduce the energy consumption by 75% of the building at the design phase, and to implement the solar system with a payback period was less than 4 years to produce an energy positive building in Nairobi. I think the main challenge is not to look for those individual standalone examples, but rather how to get it mainstream and how to get the benefit from the neighborhood level or even wider district level when it comes to these efficiency factors, rather than individual buildings. In Finland we also have cases which are far beyond the regulations, and they also provide like justified good indoor performance within, let's say, the budget. So it doesn't necessarily mean additional costs, and the payback time, if there's additional, should be kept short in order so that it could become mainstream at some point.
Thank you. And for Angie, Angie, what should be the starting point and the process for a city from a developing country for improving the sustainability of its procurement practices?
Thank you for the question. Regardless of where the city is located, I believe that the first step would be to engage the Building Efficiency Accelerator. We would be happy to help you. We would start with an assessment of what your current procurement practices are, if any. If you have any policies related to sustainable procurement in place, and do an assessment there. If not, we can take a look at the existing procurement policies. Generally, those have specifications that are related to the performance of the products and services that the local government wishes to procure, and we would then begin to add specifications around environmental performance, social components such as local contractors, local vendors and suppliers, or disadvantaged communities in terms of procuring from those suppliers, and help to build these types of criteria and specifications into your procurement policies. You'd certainly also want to work with the users of the products and services to bring them along in this journey to create a sustainable procurement repertoire within the community. There are many resources available as we've discussed, and we're happy to help point you to those that will work best for your community.
Thank you. And Curt, we've just had another question come in about how sustainable food system and sustainable tourism is effective for any developing country.
Thank you for the question. It's a bit off topic, but because there are 10 YFP programs on both sustainable tourism and sustainable food systems, I think you could certainly make connections among all of the programs, because what generally they're trying to do as an overall objective is result in more sustainable patterns of consumption and production. Tourism is obviously related to buildings and therefore procurement. Sustainable lifestyles is related to buildings. On the food systems, there's a lot of research and a lot of information about food waste globally, about food access, and I think the overall, I had a mayor once who was in a sustainable buildings panel with me, and he said if you get the food systems right and get food security right, ultimately buildings will get right as well, because what food systems do is it creates local markets. It creates the context for local sourcing of food, has many, many benefits that touch lots of different aspects of all of the consumption production patterns. So it's a little bit of making the links, but I think all of the 10 YFP programs are relevant in both developed and developing countries. If I can just add one thing to what Angie was saying about the accelerator and the various cities, I think one of the key factors to achieving the objectives of sustainable buildings or energy efficient buildings in local communities is market readiness, and governments need to be able to align their policies with the ability of the local markets to deliver. And so one of the key objectives of the accelerator is to have a multi-stakeholder engagement process where policymakers and the private sector come together, because without market readiness you can develop all sorts of ambitious targets, but unless the market is ready to deliver and can deliver, that would be a wasteful process. So again, the accelerator is very much focused on multi-stakeholder engagement, and that's a key component of accelerating energy efficiency actions.
Thank you, Curt. Now the last question, I'm going to open it up for anyone that would like to comment, but there's been a question come through, and it's been mentioned in many of the presentations today, is in relation to barriers on sustainable procurement. And so there's a question on behavioural inertia. Based on your experiences, have you got some ideas on how it can be addressed? So if anyone would like to respond, or I'll open it up.
It's Bruno here. I'll just jump in first. I'm not sure that I'm going to answer the question directly, because something needs to happen first. But the key for me, what we're talking about here, is procurement in the public sector. In the UK, at least, I think it's fair to characterise the public sector as risk-averse and generally slow to change. I don't think too many people would argue with that. The most powerful thing that I've seen that drives broad change across the public sector is evidence of action by organisations that other public sector organisations see as their peers and potentially as exemplars, and that can then have a really catalytic effect and create that momentum across the public sector at large. So it doesn't answer the first order question, which is how do you get those exemplar organisations to take that first step. But once you've managed to make that happen, I don't think there's anything more powerful to get to catalyse broader change across the public sector.
This is Pekka. If I may continue on that, I think these good examples are always good to be shared, so like awareness raising and outreach of these cases that have been done, what has been already done. And the other point that is very much relevant in the developing countries is this capacity building. So whatever development activities there are, I think this capacity building element should be included in these activities. And that goes to all stakeholders, not only to the clients, but also to the market actors.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. This is Angie. I would just add to what Bruno and Pekka have said that procurement professionals often lack confidence in terms of their understanding of what is a green product. That's not their training necessarily, that's not their area of expertise, and so they sometimes hesitate to engage in green procurement because they lack the knowledge of what is a green product. And so I think through initiatives like those that we've discussed today, we can help to provide some of these standards, labels, examples, etc., to instill a bit more confidence and build that capacity, as Pekka said.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and that takes us to the end of the webinar. And I just wanted again to thank our 5 presenters. Thank you very much for your contributions. Very interesting presentations, and thank you for answering all these difficult questions. And also, I'd like to thank all the participants for staying with us. We've still got everyone online, so they've been captivated by the presentations and the discussion. Listen, these slides in this webinar, as I mentioned at the beginning, is recorded and will be available on our knowledge management system. And I invite you to participate in future webinars, and we'll let you know when they're coming up. And certainly there's a number of webinars, as was mentioned today, coming up in the Building Efficiency Accelerator webinar series. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.